Okay, it is August 21st, 2023, 9:13 p.m. A little late here. Had a few obstacles getting over here. Life is an obstacle course, it seems, within a labyrinth, and it may itself be some kind of a sim made by some kind of a either a sadist or a demiurge, but there's some kind of influence here. I'm not saying that all of creation is intrinsically bad, but I think that this world is run by some kind of slumlord. All right, we are joined here by Lift the Veil. It says, can people actually call in? Yes, we're actually live now. Cubstar, Scorpio 88, Diana South, thank you for joining. Phase Polarizer. We'll give a few more moments. I'll give them a few more moments to show up. There's a few people who are in Discord and in Gilded that I saw talking about what we're about to get into. And I will open phones if you want to call in. If that's the Lift the Veil, I had heard the rumor that you had found out who Cicada 3301 is. And I think it's a very fascinating topic because I think Cicada, the alternate reality game, is somehow connected to the Q psyop, or whatever you want to call it, the cult, spelled with a Q. Okay, now the topic tonight is Barbie as Whore of Babylon, the Pink Mass. Now, are you all familiar with the Black Mass? The Black Mass is this, whether it was done or not. Like, you could look at the Bohemian Grove where they do the owl thing as an example of a quote Black Mass. But what I'm talking about here is a ceremony that has existed for centuries in different forms. And it's generally a sacrilegious, blasphemous mockery of the Catholic Mass, where they rewrite the Lord's Prayer. They reverse it. Now, fascinatingly, this is what I think is interesting, is that in that recent movie, Asteroid City, they actually did this ceremony where they prayed to the alien, dear alien who art in heaven, no, who art in space. And that to me is a corruption of the Lord's Prayer, similar to a Black Mass. And I don't think it's disconnected from this bigger topic. So as we get into this topic, you'll see that the Black Mass, which represents not just sacrilege, but it's more of a way of destroying the old symbolically. That's really the purpose to it. And what we're seeing right now with Barbie is a form of iconoclasm in the same way. Just like in the Catholic Mass, they might have, in the Catholic Mass, mocked in the Black Mass, you would have nuns doing the things that prostitutes would do. That's the level of blasphemy that we're talking about here. And in this case, you're seeing Barbie being repackaged as a feminist, breaking the bonds of traditional marriage, chained to the kitchen, the idea of upsetting the patriarchy. And that's part of why the right wing has been basically burning Barbie dolls. But now, here's the point. Here's what I wanted to get to, because I've been noticing some interesting connections here that I think I have to share because I think it all connects to Barbie. So I'm looking into Margot Robbie and the movie Babylon, which came out in 2022, and I started watching it. And in the first 10 or 15 minutes, I realized that this is based on Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger, which I had read some time ago, but I've been following his work. Kenneth Anger is the key figure to understanding all of this. He's the thread that we're following here. But basically this. Let's take Margot Robbie Babylon 2022. And here's the description of it. Babylon 2022 film by Damien Chazelle depicts a fictionalized 1920s Hollywood that takes inspiration from the claims featured in this book. So here you have it. This Margot Robbie movie is literally based on a book by Kenneth Anger. Now this is significant because Kenneth Anger is this underground filmmaker, co-founder of the Church of Satan, Mickey Mouseketeer. There's some connections here that you're going to see that are quite compelling, and it all ties in to what Babylon means. So just to continue, in the New Age religion, they have updated the names of the goddess from Isis to Babylon. They have done this over the last century within the New Age circles, and we're seeing it constantly externalized. And when Kenneth Anger released his book Hollywood Babylon, which was a look at the underbelly of Hollywood, he put Jane Mansfield on the cover. You'll note with the pink lettering, Hollywood Babylon. And what he admitted when he put out the book, what he said is that the cinema is where we're going to see the pageantry of Mystery Babylon for this new age. And that these are the new gods and goddesses. He pretty much made it clear that's his understanding. Now, the reason why this is significant and relevant, as you'll see, is that the entire presentation of this archetype is consistent with what we just saw with Barbie. Now, you're looking at the cover of Hollywood Babylon, and you're looking at Jane Mansfield. Look at the cover of Babylon, Margot Robbie. Now, continuing, and the reason why it's significant that Kenneth Anger is brought up here is because this solidifies the satanic, sex magic, sexual revolution connection to cinema and film as the fundamental core of the pageantry of Mystery Babylon as presented through cinema, in particular cinema. So continuing, here you have Jane Mansfield drinking from a chalice held by Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, who wrote a book called The Satanic Witch, which has a pink cover if you've seen it. Now I'm just pointing out the chalice, and note that she lived in a place called the Pink Palace, dressed in pink. Jane Mansfield is something of a Barbie archetype, early prototype here. And we've been talking about this, the Barbie and possible correlations to Babylon. And so just from the very beginning, I want to point out that Margot Robbie being in a movie called Babylon by Kenneth Anger means that she's definitely being put in the role of the Scarlet Woman. And you cannot detach it from Thelema or Satanism. And Anger also pointed out that the patron saint of cinema, the god of light, Lucifer. So let's continue. Here is Kenneth Anger in the Abbey of Thelema sex dungeon. And there's a photo of Aleister Crowley. And on the left there is Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey, father of the sexual revolution. His research redefined how people, or at least how colleges, teach the topic of human sexuality. He's probably a pervert and a psychopath if you actually look at the type of research they did. But the correlation here is Kenneth Anger, former Mouseketeer, Satanist, in a Thelemic sex dungeon with the face of this movement that became, or the leader of the sexual revolution. And what's more, the entire Thelemic New Age movement, according to Crowley, is about releasing these energies of the new aeon, liberation, which means women's lib, feminism, the stuff contained in Barbie. And what's more, and this gets into the symbolism, Babylon means the gates. And the priestess, in the role of the priestess in this context, is called the Babylon. She's the gate for what? The gate through which these energies are manifested. She's a living portal. That's the whole concept here. Now continuing, and this just underscores the fact that Kenneth Anger knows what he's doing when he's referencing that Babylon archetype, and it definitely connects it to the Babylon working that happened 20 years later after he put out this book. Or no, after the period of time where they were depicting after the 20s, because this Babylon working is this thing that happened in the 40s with the Scientologist L. Ron Hubbard, or before he was a Scientologist, and Marjorie Cameron, along with Jack Parsons. Now, Jack Parsons, Ground Zero JPL Jet Propulsion Laboratories. We're talking about the godfather of modern rocketry. We're talking about, I guess you could say, the genesis of the space religion, because this is where you have the fusion of rockets and occultism, or Babylon, Mystery Babylon, repackaged for the New Age, combined with cinema. And of course, this movie starlet, who was the star of this ritual, later surfaces in a Kenneth Anger film. Again, he's a filmmaker. The film he made is called Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, which is about the new Aeon being revealed. And it stars this central character who's another one of these red witches. And it's played by Marjorie Cameron. So the very one who was there for the summoning of the Antichrist spirit in 1946 that some think is attached to Trump. But side note, the fact of it is, she starred in his movie Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome. It says here, as indicated, and again, we're talking about Kenneth Anger, this reflects his deep interest in Thelema and the philosophy of Crowley, and he chose Marjorie Cameron as the, quote, Scarlet Woman, an honorific Crowley bestowed on certain magical partners. Crowley's concept of a ritual masquerade party where attendees dress as gods and goddesses was an inspiration for this film. So we're talking about how individuals dressing up as gods are put up on the film. And I'm saying that this is the new idolatry, that within their ritual context behind closed doors, they treat their priests and priestesses as avatars. And here he is doing it in the movie. And he says this is actually part of the new religion. So now, connecting the Babylon working and the bigger picture of our new world religion, you do have the beginning of the space program and the new heaven, which is now repackaged as space, which is a huge component of it. And we'll get back to how outer space ties into it. But later that year, 1946, Marjorie Cameron saw a UFO. First UFO sightee. And the reason why this is significant is that, well, for a few reasons. It's a year before Roswell, and they correlated it with their little ritual summoning of this spirit of the New Age that she was going to be the gateway for. So it's very significant. And then more recently, there was a movie out called Asteroid City, a Wes Anderson, where Scarlett Johansson plays a movie actress who witnesses a UFO descending. Her name, Scarlett, in my opinion, would be a reference to the Scarlet Woman archetype. Now, moving on, this New Age movement really started with this Theosophy and others. That's where it kind of got externalized. And H.P. Blavatsky has a book called Isis Unveiled. And the way this was explained to me is that the New Age goddess is now unveiled as opposed to veiled, which is why we're seeing the feminist aspect, the liberated woman as separated from the monogamy or patriarchy. Isis Unveiled is the Babylon, you could say, the archetype they created, where here you can see she's uncovered. And we're talking about the veil as being a symbol of modesty, virginity, etc. Now, the color pink. I reference the color pink because of Jane Mansfield and Barbie. But there's another reason for that connection with the color pink, and we'll talk about that next. And it has to do with the Knights Templar, and it has to do with Aleister Crowley's cult here. But ultimately, the pink symbolizes the god and the goddess conjoined. The chalice that the Whore of Babylon carries on the tarot card contains this. And we're talking about, again, they called him, I don't want to get too specific necessarily, but basically we're talking about the Knights Templar, the black and the white flag symbolizing God and goddess. The wine is the woman, the white bread is the male. We've seen this played out ritually in a few times, like in the recent months, like the last Super Bowl. If you recall the last Super Bowl, you had Rihanna in red, pregnant, with the background of stars representing a goddess. You had the male dancers all in white. This is the Super Bowl halftime show, Mystery Babylon fertility rite. The same exact ceremony in reverse was played by Kendrick Lamar with his award-winning performance for The Heart Part 5, where he's in white with a crown of thorns surrounded by female dancers in red, and they smear blood on him. This is all connected. We're talking about, again, the Templar colors mixed. White and red gives you pink. This is, again, the reason why we're seeing Barbie with the pink. And this is why Barbie is being popularized as well. Because we're looking at the distribution of an idol. And if you trace the actress, you can trace it back. You can kind of see what we're looking at here is we're looking at the replacement of the older version. And now they've thoroughly associated Barbie with feminism and with this, a girl boss thing, whatever. And I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying that what we're looking at here is a deliberate um, distribution of an idol. Now, let's go a little further here. This has to do with the Tower of Babel, because we've already talked about the Babylon, the goddess name in this new age, and how she's been represented in various forms, more recently in the movie Babylon and in Barbie. Another connection here, the Aeon of Horus. Horus is Mars, and according to Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and company, they were using Marjorie Cameron as a gateway to summon forth the energies of Horus for the New Age, which is Mars, giving birth, but not to a physical baby. Now, if you look at the first three letters of the name, it's Marge or Marg. Mars and Marge, I think, would correlate pretty well with Marjorie Cameron. I don't think these are coincidental connections. And again, the Kenneth Anger is the thing that really ties it all together, where you can see the thelemic ideology that is mainstreamed through the sexual revolution and through the cinema. Now, I have a few more notes on this. There's quite a few trails we could go down, but I'm trying to suggest here that the pink mass, is what I'm calling it, represents an act of iconoclasm, as they're not only destroying the patriarchy, like with the movie Barbie, they reference the patriarchy a few different times, but they're also destroying the goddess and bringing it back in this new form. So let me bring up some more notes on this. And I haven't seen the movie yet, and I don't know if I will. I don't know if I need to. Okay, moving on. Now, what does the space program have to do with this? Because the whole thing is about space, and space as the new heaven, and the Tower of Babel. Well, the Tower of Babel, in my opinion, is the unification of all mankind in one language on this trip from the earth to the heavens. And I think it's represented by the space program. But it's also represented by America. Babylon is America in this new context. And here's what I was looking at today that really just struck me as tremendously interesting. So here you have this year of light. The Masonic calendar begins with the year of creation, supposedly 4,000 years ago, or 4,000 years before the Common Era, before the AD. So basically you add 4,000. So right now you would add it and you'd be like, okay, well, we're in the year, 6023 or something. So in other words, the Masonic year calendar commenced their era with the creation of the world, which they call Annu Lucius, in the year of light. Now, this is significant because if you follow the Old Testament and the lineage of these characters and the time of the creation to destruction, you would arrive at the Tower of Babel's construction beginning 1776 AL. 1776 Annu Lucius, the Tower of Babel's construction begins. That is 1,776 years from creation, or 120 after the Great Flood. Now this connects to the founding of America, 1776. And if you look at the back of the dollar bill, you have a Roman numeral, which again is 1776. MDCCLXXVI. Now what I'm connecting here is this. The building of the Tower of Babel, 1776, corresponds to the building of America, 1776. And it gets even more interesting here, because if you add the 400 years, or 4,000 years, to 1776, what do you get? 5,776. So in other words, the Masonic year of light, year that you would attach to 1776, adding 4,000, gives you a number that just happens to be the height of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid is 5,776 inches tall. 5776 Anu Lucius is when America began. So here is just a direct correlation between the Tower of Babel, America, the dollar bill, and the pyramid. And what I've been saying here is on the back of the dollar bill, that pyramid actually represents the Tower of Babel. And this just, to me, suggests that yes, because that pyramid was the tallest building in the world, or structure, for the longest time. But the point of it is the symbolism. And again, at the very bottom it says 1776. Now the Masons began in 1717, at least in their latest form. Now, continuing here. If you look at the image as mostly, you'll see this everywhere. This is the traditional representation of the Tower of Babel. It tends to look like a spiral shape, or maybe even, as you can see here in this depiction, it reaches into the clouds. But this is the Tower of Babel as commonly depicted, like an inverted screw. But now here's an article from WorldNet Daily. Move over, Nimrod. Amazon gets green light for its own Tower of Babel. And I've spoken about this before, how Jeff Bezos is building a Tower of Babel. Now, this is very significant for a few reasons. The builder of the Tower of Babel is Nimrod. And there's a few things about Bezos we could get into, but the first thing I want to point out is it's not insignificant that he's the richest man in the world, and that he went to space on the anniversary of Apollo 11 at 9:11 a.m. There's a few things about him that stand out here. We're talking about just this Bezos character, or Dr. Evil, which is one of his movie representations, who has headquarters in a space needle, and the space needle and the Tower of Babel mean the same thing. But now, something else to point out. The One World Trade Tower is 1,776 feet tall. Like, what are the odds? Obviously they're referencing America's founding, but no, I'm saying that that number is actually more strongly correlated with the Tower of Babel's construction and now its completion, when Nimrod took his own rocket to space. And when he was in that rocket, he was in the capsule that fell. The capsule on the rocket is actually the same symbol as the glowing capstone on the pyramid. And it's not a coincidence either that Bezos has a very pronounced disparity in how his eyes are. Let me get you a picture here, but you'll see one of his eyes is open much wider. In all of the old pictures, it's very, very evident. And I've been pointing out, as you know, many of you point out the symbolism. You're always looking at the one eye symbolism, and it is a symbol of Nimrod, or the builder of this order, the architect of it all. So again, what's wrong with Jeff Bezos' eye? This is from Quora. They say nothing's wrong. He just has a droopy upper eyelid or something. So there's all these questions, but I'm saying it's super obvious. It's conspicuous. This isn't some minor thing. Here's like a popular magazine. I'm not sure which one it was, Wired or something, but it's almost like they photoshopped it. And I'm saying that this is not a coincidence, because this man has the most money in the world. On the back of the dollar bill, you have the Tower of Babel with the mono eye on top. So the correlation here, the one eye, mono eye, money, the monolithic structure that runs this place, and the man at the top of the pyramid. I'm not saying it's him in particular, but he's in this role. And when he went to space on the anniversary of Apollo 11, that's a reference to walking on the moon. It's a reference to walking in heaven, walking on the moon, treading on God's turf before God knocks the tower down. And he launched at 9:11 a.m., which is a reference to the tower falling. And it's also not a coincidence that on the 33rd day of the year, we're talking February 2nd, 2021, he stepped down from Amazon. So he steps down, and on the same day, Musk has this rocket blow up with the number 42 on it. And if you've been listening for a while, you know the number 42 is always associated with these things falling. There's these interesting associations with these numbers, with Musk and the space papacy. I mean, Bezos bought a $42 million clock, all to pay homage to the same deity they worship. But my point being, We are witnessing in slow motion the fall of Babylon, which is America, the fall of the Tower of Babel, symbolized by the International Space Station, symbolized by the space program itself, which is the building of the tower that reaches into the heavens. And with his mono eye and the most money, he's just a representation of Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel. Now let's continue through my notes here in the pink mass, because what I'm suggesting here is this is the connection with the space program that the religion needs. So your trip to heaven, your salvation, combined with the cinema, which is a lot of the pageantry and the idol worship. And then I don't think you can separate Barbie dolls from idols. Idols and dolls are the same thing. And what they're doing, I believe, is also a form of, you could say, magic. You could say. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch because idol magic is really a matter of, and I've looked at different traditions that deal with this topic of imbuing fetishes or dolls with life and the transference of energy and the theory behind it. And a lot of it is talked about extensively by Kenneth Anger's friend from the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, in his books. He talks about how the purpose of the ritual is to cut off from your critical thinking, your intellect, to suppress your intellect, to engage the subconscious, to engage free association, to insert or to enter into what he described as a state of play or imagination, like children at play. And he even said in his writings that that state of mind is most conducive for doing magic, which is interesting because you're putting idols in the hands of children. And I don't think it's a stretch at all. Again, the very basis of this conversation here is that Margot Robbie Babylon, the movie, is based on the work of a Satanist who had described in all of his writings the real meaning behind this specific archetype of this goddess. And then again, the pink associated with Jane Mansfield ties into the real secrets behind the Templars. I have some notes on it here. This is an actual quote. The quote, "Sacrament of the Aeon." And this has to do with Aleister Crowley. I have a few notes here, and it gets a little esoteric, and I'm trying to just stay with the stuff that we can just point at, stuff we can reference, stuff that they actually write down. And there is a lot of stuff that Crowley wrote down on the whole topic of what these colors mean in the right context. So, for example, in fact, this is actually something that I think is worth looking at. We're talking about transference of energy. Crowley wrote this thing, a similar rite of exhaustion that leads not to spiritual communing, but a sort of vampirism. And this is just basically talking about the idea that, quote, Crowley claimed, when the ritualist is pushed to the point of death from exhaustion in this way, their spirit can be enslaved by the aids or their power transferred. Interesting notion there. But more specifically, the OTO describes itself as a form of Gnostic Neo-Christian Templar religion with sexual magic as its primary secret. And now here's where we get to the color pink. As Aleister Crowley wrote in his Book of Thoth, quote, "She rides astride the beast. In her left hand she holds the reins, representing the passion that unites them. In the right she holds the cup, the Holy Grail. In this cup are mingled the elements of the sacrament of the Aeon." So the meaning behind that, what are the mingled elements? What are the sacraments of the Aeon? It's talking about the Gnostic Catholic Mass. Again, it said it's a Gnostic Neo-Christian Templar. In the Gnostic Mass, they're talking about the commingling of male and female, white, red, gives you pink. So I'm suggesting here that the pink of Barbie is actually a reference to the same thing that the red and white on the Templar flag are. We're referencing basically body fluids, and this is the quote, "Sacrament of the Aeon," and it's the key point of their ritualistic worship of the Whore of Babylon. And there's more here. Again, I want to reiterate that the scarlet and the red are Mars symbols, and the name Margot or Marjorie. These are all, I think, connections. Babylon means gate. I even think the name Harlequin may tie into harlot. There's a lot of coding that goes into these actors and actresses that play these roles. But Barbie saying bring down the patriarchy, the new goddess represented as liberated, quote, or free or unveiled. And it might even be pertinent here to mention that in this new construct that they're giving out to the masses, but this is what they actually teach in their esoteric temples, their grottos, their abbeys. Horus is an androgen, meaning it's no longer going to be a patriarchy. It's not going to be matriarchal. It's going to be the perfect balance between the two. And this might even explain why we see this Baphomet stuff everywhere, because it's about a balance. Now, that's why they're destroying the old Barbie. That's why they're destroying men, uh, as in the idea that testosterone is a toxin, for example, toxic masculinity. They never say what non toxic masculinity is because all masculinity is toxic. But this is all very interesting because, Horus is non binary. The primary god of the New Age, their new deity, is non binary. So this is all making sense if you look at the bigger context. Why would they be giving out Barbie at this time? And I also want to draw your attention to Trump because we've already talked about the Tower of Babel and how it's falling, how America is Babylon. And it was represented as Babylon. It is represented as Babylon pretty well in New York's Cathedral of St. John the Divine, where it has the Twin Towers being bowled over by a tidal wave. It has all kinds of destruction, but it actually has America in Revelation as Babylon. Now, in Revelation 17, you have the Whore of Babylon, and, quote, on her forehead was written a name that has a secret meaning, Great Babylon, mother of all prostitutes. So this idea of the scarlet woman ties into the Whore of Babylon, who's got the scarlet and who has Babylon the Fallen on her brow. So think about this. You put on a scarlet hat because you think America has fallen. MAGA, make America great again, because America has fallen. It's no longer great. You see the kind of meaning there? And it happens to be scarlet. So there's probably not a coincidence with that. And then the name MAGA actually means witch. Actually means like a sorceress. It's a feminine. Also a reference to the Whore of Babylon. So I don't think any of this is coincidental. There's this pretty well-known image of Trump on the cover of Time, Trump's war on Washington, where he's leaning against the Washington Monument, and it's cracked. Well, he brought the crack in. He released the crack in on 11/3/2020. Think about that. 11/3 is the date the One World Trade Tower opened. 11/3/2014, the 1,776-foot tall tower. I mean, all of this ties into the Kraken, and all of it ties into that number 1776 and how it correlates with the founding of America, the building of the Tower of Babel according to the Masonic calendar, the height of the Pyramid of Giza, the Great Pyramid's height in inches, which correlates to the Tower of Babel on the back of the dollar bill with 1776 on the bottom, with the Eye of Nimrod at the top. Now, I've gone through most of my notes here about the pink mass. This is why I referenced the black mass at the very beginning, because this is actually, if you think about it, it is a form of paradigm shocking blasphemy if you really get into the underbelly of all this. But none of this is coincidental. The common thread here is Kenneth Anger, a person of immense interest in all of this. And the fact that, and I didn't even put all these pieces together until earlier today, that the inauguration of the Pleasure Dome is a thelemic film, and it casts Marjorie Cameron in the same role that she played ritually in 1946, and she's the first UFO sightee, all very interesting connections. But I'm putting out an article on this, but I thought, let me talk about this first and see what others have to say before I publish this article. But it all ties in to this bigger construct, this Tower of Babel, America as Babylon, and how it's falling, and Trump's role in it all. And we're not even through fleshing all of this out, I guarantee it. There's quite a bit more that we could add into. I'll scroll through Gilded to see what I've missed, but I'm just sticking with the stuff that is more in your face, easy to see. But it's pretty clear to me that there's a strong connection here to be made that, yeah, Barbie is a plastic idol representing the horror of Babylon. And pink in this context is something that you wouldn't want them to know what it actually means. It's it's also fascinating to me that we're looking at the toys being distributed as possible literal idols, not just dolls. Okay, let me go through your comments to see what I've missed here. Phase Polarizer says 5 copies of Autohoaxology 101 left. Okay, if you go to Ko-Fi slash Tim Osman, we may have a few more copies. I'm placing an order after this live stream. I already ordered the first 10. I'm going to order another. No, I think I ordered 20. I'm going to order another grip of a batch of them, and then I want to have a lot of copies here. I want to be able to actually order them in bulk so I can drive the prices down. It needs to be distributed in like in person. It needs to be in people's hands in the meatverse. I don't want this to be a PDF. It's a textbook for a reason. It's hardback. But there's going to be a couple of changes, I'm sure, once I've seen it and I've had it in my hands. So what I want to do is look it over one more time before I place a big order. And I should have it in my hands in a couple of days. Okay, here's one more connection that I have to make here. The number 113, or the date 11/3, is associated with the beast from the sea, the Kraken, because that's the day that Trump broke everything, if you think about it. And that's the day that the Kraken was going to be released according to all of the election challengers. I want to point out he's a challenger. And the challenger blew up at 1 minute 13 seconds, 113. 113 is in all the Pixar films, and it has to do with what we're describing. But the Kraken, the beast from the sea, is the destroyer in the abyss, referenced in Revelation 9:11. And this all ties into 9/11, the Titanic, James Cameron being at the Titanic on 9/11. It all ties into Revelation 9:11, where they name the Antichrist. They name the destroyer Abaddon or Apollyon. But think about it. The Apollyon connection, to me, I think it's got a few areas we can go into, but I want to focus on Abaddon, which is the Hebrew, because I think that means a bad dawn. And lately they've been referring to Trump as a dawn, a very bad dawn. Abaddon is the destroyer. Now, his 2020 election challenge is the Kraken. It is the crack in our bifurcated system. It is the stress point where everything falls apart, breaks apart, just like on that Time magazine cover. These cracks. So what I'm suggesting is that Donald Trump is the wrecking ball that breaks everything. That he is the destroyer. And in Oppenheimer, which came out at the same time as Barbie, and there's some connections there I have to delve into, but he famously recited the verse about I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. So the destroyer connects to the destroyer in the abyss, to Abaddon, to Trump. That he's the destroyer that connects Oppenheimer, the nuke, 116, 611, Turner Diary, domestic violent extremist endgame. It's all encoded in there. And then on his hat, he's got 4547 now, which is a 9/11 on the side of his head. It's all just lining up pretty, I don't know. It's almost like too obvious. It's almost too easy. It's lining up so well. A bad dawn is what really got me. I'm like, is Trump really in the place of the destroyer or some kind of antichrist-like character? And well, Bezos is Nimrod. Musk is reprising the role of Constantine. Like, I think on the world stage, Trump is definitely fulfilling this role. A couple other notes I just want to reiterate. Jane Mansfield on the cover of Hollywood Babylon, she being this witch wearing pink. I believe her daughter was, or she and her daughter were around Anton LaVey quite a bit, and there's a lot of pictures about them. But what Anton LaVey represented was sexual revolution. What the Lima represented, same thing. So here we have just bringing it up, that these ideas of women's liberation, it's all tied into the occult and to this transformation of society from the perspective of the New Age movement, disguised as social sciences or progressivism. It's just a cover. So, yes, Barbie is the Whore of Babylon. I think we can leave it at that. I'll need to watch Oppenheimer to get some more details on how it ties in. But there's definitely something there in terms of alchemy and everything else that we're talking about here that involves the Trinity site. And it can't be really separated as a discussion. If you remember Barbieheimer, the mass media already merged these things together. Okay, let me continue through your notes here. By the way, judging by the pictures, it looks like The Matrix won. Some celebrity gossip rag published this. He needs to shape up. Keanu Reeves blasted for chubby body while spending family day on a boat. And honestly, like, he doesn't look chubby in my view. He looks average. I guess they hold Neo to a higher standard. Okay, Phase Polarizer says they like to get hosts from a Catholic church for use during these black masses. Yes. Damn Jack says the Gilded server is trash. It's become an echo chamber of sorts. Kinda sucks. Well, Gilded is the alternative to Discord, and Discord is flooded with neo-Nazis. And if you looked at our Gilded server, I would say, yeah, it's an echo chamber for anti-vax neo-Nazis and then some memesters. I mean, maybe that's a slight mischaracterization, but you couldn't get rid of these paid agents spamming it with stuff that got us banned. And I'm not going to risk putting a lot of research and content in a place where they're just going to burn it. But I agree that the Gilded server could be bigger. We could have more people, which is how you get rid of echo chambers. Scorpio88 says DLive notifications are trash. Glad I checked you were on. Noted. What I'll do in the future is I will hit on and off on the multicasting software, so it blasts out a text notification. Okay, we're continuing to go down some comments going back the last hour. Lean Dion says, in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. Yeah, the eye in the pyramid is the eye that represents, I think, the view from above, the knowers who are manipulating the believers below. And in my recent representations of the eye in the triangle, I replaced the eye with a camera lens. I don't even think it's a coincidence that Marjorie Cameron is the priestess that represents the inauguration of this new age. Because, camera on. Can't be a coincidence. We're talking about a gateway. I mean, it has multiple levels of meaning here, but the short of it is this. If we have a unifying worldview, it represents a minority interest, an elite, a small group, possibly one person, maybe the demiurge. And that one view that gets approved, and it's given the state's stamp of approval, everything else is censored, that is the perspective of the power elite that run this place. And I think it's represented by their control over media, their lens, their camera lens. What their viewfinder focuses on is what is established as true. And as this world seems increasingly subjective because of the deluge of malinformation, their point of view is even more authoritative, and they have more control, I think, than ever, because they drown out anybody else who tries to contradict them. We can call out the truth all day long. It doesn't matter. Woo's News should have broken the internet. Woo's News should have shut down our governments while they figured out how to get rid of this PSYOP entertainment complex. Woo's News did the 21 minutes or less. That's the one. So if you haven't seen it, let me put a link below because this is important. He did a breakdown of January 6th called Everything Wrong with the Capitol shooting in 21 minutes. And he breaks it all down. I mean, it's unbelievable just how terrible these PSYOP agents are. Anyway, tomorrow, Woo's News and I will be live here. So you want to stay in the know, stay on the newsletter. You won't want to miss this conversation. It's going to happen sometime tomorrow. I don't have the exact time, but I do plan on sending out a text alert and email alerts at least half an hour in advance so none of you miss it, because we're going to take questions from the chat. Okay, continuing here. Dinah South says, Mother of Harlots, by the way, in all capitals, KJV. We says, ooh, the red and the white, good one, IPS. No, I actually read that. I read that the pink on the Church of Satan's Satanic Witch, which is like the companion to the Bible, I guess, that the pink ties in somehow to the Templars and to sex magic. And then I found some writings with Crowley and the Gnostic Catholic Mass, but I definitely found that information at some point before. All right, continuing through comments. Wonka World says big plastic boots and permanently walking on eggshells, so that's feminism. Well, I think Barbie is technically white feminism because the option of being a feminist is presumably only open to those who have the privilege to exert that kind of power, and it would benefit them. But apparently it's not open to everybody. So it's been getting some criticism on those grounds. But yeah, there's no doubt that Barbie speaks out against the patriarchy, and I'm saying that this is just part of the temperament and the mentality that they're propagating through this idol worship. Thinks he's a Penguin 101 says, could they claim the public roleplay theater is defense? I think so. Yeah, sometimes I think that they can rationalize global mind control, quote unquote. I think they can rationalize it. It wouldn't be hard. You'd say you're trying to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people, and if you got to lie to everybody so they don't eat each other and they don't eat us, let's do it. Like, I think they have to, for I think they believe it's a benevolent dictatorship. Okay, let's see what we have here. Dinah South says Trump Tower dedicated to Freemasonry in 666. Trump Tower opened on the 45th day of the year, according to Gematria 101. Yeah, this is all highly relevant. It really is. Everything about Trump, everything about his buildings, everything about the towers tie into Nimrod, this builder. And I think Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos, they all represent this challenger to God. That's ultimately what I think. I think that the Tower of Babel is a middle finger to God. And I think the space program is the same thing. And that what Bezos did when he launched into space, symbolically, of course, with the hat on, the cowboy hat, he represented a billionaire who's treating space like a new frontier to go exploit. And this is the theme of Don't Look Up, the thing that brought us all down because we followed the billionaires and their greed. But I think that he represented not only an affront to God in going up there and walking on the moon, being tied into the story because the anniversary date, but he sent Captain Kirk up there, William Shatner. William Shatner cried. He said, the earth is dying. I felt like I was at a funeral wake. And Bezos is, spraying champagne on women while Shatner's crying. The point of it is, Shatner said the earth is going to be hit with a catastrophic event. The earth can't survive. And there you see Bezos the same week on a mega yacht. Now, the mega yacht symbolizes the Titanic, which symbolizes America that's sinking. The Twin Towers symbolize the same thing. But he's on a mega yacht, and the symbolism is also that of the Tower of Babel. Too big to fail, Titanic. Man's hubris. So when you see Bezos at this time period, when he's out on his boat flexing and his servants all have masks, and he's like moving bridges for his mega yacht to go through, he's doing this knowing the toll it supposedly takes on the environment. He's one of the biggest polluters in the world. He's facilitated pollution at levels that would be unimaginable, just decades ago. I mean, the amount of trash. And I'm just saying that his trashing of the world, his feeding into this capitalism, which is destroying the earth and profiting, becoming the richest man on earth, all of that is meant to say that he is flaunting God. Not the Old Testament God, but the globe, global warming, the new God construct. The Noah from the Old Testament is like, if you guys don't change your ways, God's going to flood the place. The National Oceanic and atmospheric administration, symbolized by the dove like Noah from the Bible, say if you don't cut back your capitalism, globe's gonna flood the place. So you can see Bezos on his mega yacht, which symbolizes the Titanic. And this is all around the same time that the movie Don't Look Up was out, which is this theme of the rich getting us all killed by a comet because they want to mine the thing. A movie Don't Look Up, again, it starred Leonardo DiCaprio, the face of the Titanic. And we talked about this at length before, but my point being, the character of Bezos is flaunting Globe's wrath. He doesn't care. He went into space. That's not sustainable. He's inviting destruction. Okay, continuing here on your comments. Yeah, for the greater good, what I meant by that really is that the earliest writings I can find that deal with this is the writings, I think is it Polybius? They talk about the instrumentum regni, this tool of monarchy. Tacitus inspired the phrase. And what we have here is a description of government that recognizes that, quote, in my opinion, they have adopted this course for the sake of the common people. It is a course which perhaps would not have been necessary had it been possible to form a state of wise men, but the multitude is fickle, full of lawless desires, unreasoned passion, and violent anger. The multitudes, therefore, must be held in by invisible terrors and pageantry. For this reason, I think not the ancients acted rashly and at haphazard in introducing among the people the notions of gods and the beliefs in the terrors of hell. Furthermore, he says, the moderns are rash and foolish for banishing such beliefs. And you could look at modern psy-war and even major psyops that change our worldviews, like moon landings and nuclear detonations. These things, you could look at these as establishing new superstitions, establishing new gods. The other day I was talking about the advent of the nuclear bomb and how what they did is they reset geopolitics. They put us all in a hostage situation. It's like they introduced a new god that everybody was terrified in and believed in. No different. I think it's an old system of control. But how all this ties in with Mystery Babylon and these secret rites being externalized, this new age, the revolution, the unending revolutions. I mean, I think it's never ending. I think they're always revamping society and keeping us kind of behind a little bit. I think they're always rug pulling humanity. But this connection between the age of Satan, the age of Horus, the new goddess, the Mystery Babylon incarnate, and the Tower of Babel representing Nimrod's challenge to God. All this stuff is, I think it's pretty well established here. And then one more point about Nimrod, by the way. After the floods, he's credited with having built the first civilization. And if you think about it, the flood, Bezos, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Musk, like who are going to be the ones to build after global warming wrecks the place? After God floods the place, after God knocks over the Tower of Babel, who do you think is going to be the ones to rebuild? Do you remember how much money Jeff Bezos made the first quarter of the pandemic in 2020? If I recall, he made $33 billion in the Great Reset. So I'm like, even that seems to indicate that, yeah, he's one of the first ones who will help to rebuild this thing. Anyway, thanks for joining. I don't have time for calls tonight. We will tomorrow. Don't want to miss tomorrow at all, so get on the newsletter because we're going to be meeting with Woo's News and talking about the January 6th event and what really happened. Thank you for joining. Archives will go out in email, and I'll put out a few other links that you might find useful, especially if you want to get on the text alerts and you don't want to miss any of our live open phones live streams. And here we go. This is back to the archives. Have a great evening.
right. Pardon the interruption. It is July 5th, 2021. Infinite Plane Radio, open phones for open minds and closed minds. We don't discriminate. 833-311-1984. We were live about half an hour ago, and OBS got nuked, and I had to